Hey, what's up everyone? This is Metz here, and in today's video I would like to talk to you a little bit about ear training, how important it is, and actually dive deep into how I personally practice ear training and how I personally still do it, but also have done it back in the days when I was kind of a newbie in ear training, didn't know much about it. You know, I couldn't recognize any interval, a chord, or anything when I went to music school. I really started hustling and grinding when it comes to ear training. So today first start the video, I'm going to talk to you about how important it is. If you don't already understand or realize how important ear training is if you want to master your instrument and make actually better, quicker progress, you know, regardless of where you're starting. Ear training is a huge part of music in general. And I mean, not only for musicians, you know, ear training is great for musicians, obviously, but it's also awesome for anyone that wants to study composing or production. You know, being able to hear the distances between notes and hear the tools that you can use in music in general whether you're creating or transcribing or all those things is extremely important. The second part of the video, I'm going to actually show you on the computer using an awesome software called Earmaster. I'm going to show you exactly how I personally practice. So why is ear training important? I'm going to make it super simple. You need three things. It's kind of a generalization, but I like to see this triangle of things that you really need if you want to become a complete musician. The first thing you need is technique, okay? Technique is very simple. It's just how does your instrument work? You got to train your muscles and your muscle memory. You got to train whatever part of your body you're using to play the instrument that you're playing. That's extremely important. That part is, you know, more like sports in one way, where it's just pure physical exercise. Now, that's great. The second part is music theory. I love music theory, wrote a book, 2 books about it. Now, to me, it's one of the most fascinating parts of music. It makes my brain work, which I really like. But anyways, you need to understand what you're playing. You need to know music theory, as it is the grammar of music. It's what makes sense, what makes music make sense. So second part, music theory. Now the third part, you don't want to forget that third part, which is ear training. And ear training is just simply recognizing and hearing what you're playing. And I often take this example with students. It's like, if you're a painter, it's one thing to know how to use your brush. That's technique. It's another thing to know that in theory, you know, blue and yellow make green. But you gotta know what blue looks like, what yellow looks like, and what green looks like, right? Knowing only the theory of how colors work is not gonna make you a great painter, right? If you try to play music without hearing what you're playing, it's kind of like trying to paint in colors and not being able to see colors, right? It's not gonna work really well for you. Anyways, so that's why ear training is super important. Now, where do you start in ear training? Well, it's very simple. First of all, you need to understand 2 things. A lot of people are just like, well, I don't have perfect pitch, so I can't really do ear training. Well, that's bullshit. Sorry, but perfect pitch, you know, is apparently there's still research about it. Apparently, it's kind of a gift. You still need to work on it. And perfect pitch, for those that don't know, is just being able to recognize the frequency of a note, being able to recognize the note itself. Like I play a certain note and you're like, oh, that's a B flat, okay? That's perfect pitch. But what we're doing when we're practicing ear training is not so much perfect pitch, it's what we call relative pitch. It's irrelevant whether what you're hearing is a C, a D, or F sharp or something. What you want to start being able to recognize is the distance between notes. Between 2 notes, 3 notes, 4 notes, and obviously if you're starting fresh, if you don't know anything about music theory or if you don't know anything about ear training yet, well, you're gonna have to start with the smallest number of notes that can be played together, right, as a group of notes, which is 2 notes. And in music theory, 2 notes, which can be played, at the same time or one after the other in both ways, high to low and low to high, 2 notes are called a interval. There's a guy in the last video that says I said interval wrong. I'm sorry. I'm from France, so sometimes I say a couple words a little bit funny. I apologize. Anyways, intervals. You need to be able to recognize all the intervals. And I'm not going to do music theory lessons today, but since there is 12 notes and intervals are groups of 2 notes, there is also 12 intervals. And each of these intervals has a particular characteristic, a particular sound that you can easily recognize regardless of what notes are played, right? What's important is not the notes, it's the distance between those 2 notes. And in music, distance is a number of steps and half steps. For example, between C and D, there is a whole step, okay? And a whole step, knowing that you have note C and a note D and a whole step between them, we're going to call this interval a major second, okay? But it could also be D to E. D to E is another major second. And what's cool with relative pitch and intervals is that they all have the same characteristic. They all have the same sound. So, once you know how to recognize a major second, you know how to recognize pretty much all major seconds. Now, I really want to make this clear and really insist on this point right here, okay? If you know how to recognize intervals, you are pretty much, without exaggerating, 80% there. If you can recognize intervals that quick, all of them at any octaves, you've done most of the work. Why? Because all the tools that we build in music, whether it's in melody, so meaning scales and modes, or harmonically, which means chords, triads, tetrads, all of these are merely series or piles of intervals. So if you know how to recognize 1, you know how to recognize 2, and then you know how to recognize 3. So now obviously it takes a lot of work to get those 20% down, right? It takes a long time. And eventually you want to be able to recognize, a chord like a triad, not as like 2 intervals, but as like a unique entity called triad. Eventually you'll get there. As you practice, your ear is going to be able to recognize 2, 3, 4 notes just like this. But once you have this, once you master that, you'll see it's crazy. Like once you get through this dip of mastering intervals and being able to recognize them, the rest just goes super, super, super fast. You're gonna have more and more fun. You're gonna see how useful it is to, improvise and compose and pick up pieces by ear. You're gonna see how awesome it is and how free you're gonna feel when it comes, to playing music when you develop your ear. Now, the main problem with ear training is that when you want to practice it, it's kind of hard to do it on your own, right? Normally, like the way I did it in music school at first, before I found out about Earmaster, was, a buddy and I would be in a room with a piano and he would play chords and intervals, and he would pretty much blind test me, and I would try to, recognize, be like, well, you just played a major third, and he would tell me if I'm right or wrong, okay? Now that's great, but I don't know about you, but I didn't always have a friend next to me willing to play some intervals or chords or piano notes when I wanted to practice my ear. right? And now why do you need someone else to do it? Well, you need someone else because if you're the one playing, the chord of the interval, as you're playing it, supposedly if you know a little bit about music theory, you know what you're playing, and so it's not really interesting because you're biased. You already kind of know what you're playing, and so you're not fully relying on your ear. And that's what you want to do when you practice ear training. Sometimes you just want to let go of the instrument, close your eyes and rely only on your ear. At first, that's really what you want to do. So I started surfing on the internet, wondering if there was a way to practice, ear training, and it was a couple years ago, and I found this software called Earmaster. All right, I downloaded the trial version, and I was pretty much instantly convinced, right? Because what Earmaster is, honestly, it's just somebody else testing you on ear training, right? It's like your artificial or computer buddy giving you exercises to do with all the answers. But not only that, like there's a bunch of other cool features that we're gonna talk about. And without waiting any longer, let's dive into Earmaster. Let's talk about what you can do with it and how I personally still use it, and have used it. Use it with my students to develop your ear. Alright guys, so here we are, just open Earmaster, and this is what the main menu looks like over here. Okay, well actually the main menu is here, right? So a couple courses here. Beginner's course is kind of cool because it's a lot about music theory, so it's going to tell you the main notions that you need to know about music theory in order to actually start the exercises. But we're not going to worry about this right now. General workshop, so that's where you're going to spend most of your time, right here. General workshops, okay? So that's where the fun is, okay? So here we have all the musical tools that you're going to, that you use when you're playing music. So when you play music, you're going to start with, as I said, identifying only groups of two notes, and groups of two notes in music are called intervals, all right? So at first, it's really easy. It's just comparing two intervals and telling which one is bigger or smaller than the other. And then you go into interval identification, so where, it's blind testing. The interval is played harmonically or melodically, and we'll talk about that just a little later. And you got to recognize it. And now the third exercise, which is a little bit more complicated, that's kind of a little more advanced, is interval singing. So now some of you may think, well, I'm not a singer, I don't sing well, that's not for me. Well, again, this is an excuse, and it's kind of bullshit because because the point of interval singing is not really to have a nice voice and sing the interval with a beautiful melodic voice. It's just to know exactly in your head where the pitch of the interval is. It allows you to interiorize what you're playing, and it's not about singing it, it's mostly about hearing it in your head, so that when you're soloing, for example, when you're improvising, it's really important to know how to sing intervals, because it will give you a lot of liberty in your improvisation. That's, those guys, I don't know if you know, like George Benson, for example, he does a lot of playing and singing at the same time. And practice, it's amazing because this way you can actually express yourself and literally play what you're singing in your head, right? So obviously you got to link it to your instrument at one point, but it starts with that. It starts with singing intervals, even if you don't have the most beautiful voice. Anyways, all right, so then groups of two notes, that's intervals. Groups of three notes are, or more, three notes or more is chords, okay? So obviously when you go there, it's going to start with triads and then go up, to tetrads and extended chords and add more and more and more. It's really progressive. It starts simple and then goes more and more complicated. And then really awesome exercise over here, which is chord progressions. Chord progressions are essential. It's awesome to recognize chord progressions. That's great if you're, in a jam and you're hearing some people play a couple chords and you want to sit in. Well, if you know your chord progressions, you can hear it instantly, pick up the scales, boom, start jamming. Or it's also awesome if you're trying to pick up a piece by ear, if you're trying to transcribe, knowing how to recognize chord progressions is awesome because it takes you a couple seconds or minutes and boom, you got the tune figured out. All right, scales, and this also includes modes. So scales and modes, they put it under the same name, which is cool because modes are scales to some extent, so that's great. So same thing, it's gonna start easy with like major scales and then go more and more complex. And then rhythm is important. Rhythm is also part of ear training, right? Being able to recognize 8th notes, 16th notes in relation to a tempo is very, very, very important. A lot of people are like, well, I'm a drummer or something, I don't really need ear training. Yes, you do. You do need ear training because recognizing rhythms is also an ear training exercise, okay? And finally, melodies. So that's kind of, that's great if you actually want to know how to sight sing or even read music. Those exercises are awesome. Now, today, what we're going to do is mainly focus on intervals, okay? I can't really go through all the exercises, but again, as I said, if you master intervals, you're already, it's 80% of the work is done if you can master intervals. So we're going to dive deep into this, and we're going to start identifying some intervals. Boom, sorry. Cool. So here I made it so that you could start with the two first intervals, right? Which are minor second and major second. So there is actually unison before this. Unison is playing twice the same note, but it's pretty easy to recognize, so it doesn't really count, okay? The smallest interval above unison is minor second, which is a half step between two notes. And sorry, here's the minor second here. All right, so they tell you it's like the Jaws theme, and then major second, which are the two first notes of Happy Birthday to You. Dun, 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 dun. Yeah. So here we go. So let's just do this first exercise just a little bit, and then we'll go back, and I'm gonna go a little bit faster and tell you all the cool things you can do with it. So again, when you start doing ear training, the first thing you want to do is take the guitar and put it down. Relax. I know you want to play, but you gotta chill and put the guitar down or the instrument down and actually use only your ear. All right, so we're going to begin the exercise. So here's what it looks like. You got the music over here, and I think you can change the key, but I usually keep it in treble. And here on the bottom, there's a couple of different options. The first one is just, well, it shows you the interval and you got to recognize it. So I would start with this, but then if you want to change that, you can actually go here and you can put a piano down there. If you're a pianist, you can put a guitar here, but we're going to keep the multiple choice for now. All right. So first question. So here we go. So I heard obviously here that it was a major second. It might not be that obvious to you at first, but again, as you practice, you're going to get better and better at that. Another major second. That's a minor second. All right. So anyways, that's for intervals. Now, as you make progress, I'm going to go over here, you're going to discover more and more intervals. And they're not going to be played only melodically like they were played right here. Melodically means the two notes one after the other, but you can also play them harmonically, the two notes together. Right? And so anyways, it gets a little harder. You add more and more and more and more intervals until you get to the last exercise, which is pretty much everything. All intervals between unison and octave, and played harmonically, ascendingly, and descending. Here we go. All right, so here's the major third, minor second, minor third, minor second descending, major seventh, octave. Anyway, so you can see that I'm going quite fast, and that's because I've practiced. All right, so there's no mystery here. It's just about practice. So now, all right. So now I just reactivated a function that I forgot to activate before, which allows you to actually see the first note over here. So that's kind of like the second step, and I think by default it does show you the first note over here. So when I play this question, for example, what it does is shows you the first note of the interval being played. Okay, so apparently here the first note is an F, and so if you're trying to not only recognize your intervals but also find out the notes of this interval. For example, here I hear a minor second, and so if that's the first note, I know that the note after that is going to be a G flat. Boom. Yes, so that's really good if you're actually, if you really want to be a little bit more advanced, more comfortable with reading music as well. And also, it's also good to know, it's one thing to know what an interval sounds like. It's also good to spell the notes of this interval and know what notes this interval is made of. All right? So let's do another one. So here I hear a major seventh. So if the first note is a D flat, the major seventh above that is going to be a C. All right, and here we go. Now, there's kind of two ways I used to practice when I was in music school. The first one was to take my time, play a question, really hear in my head, okay, count the steps if I needed to, take my time and make sure I have the answer right, okay? And then when I was done with that, I would do a session of just going super fast, okay? And so now, obviously over here, there's all the intervals, but you would do that for each level. So even when you only have minor and major second, okay? First, take your time, answer the question, and then speed it up, okay? And that's gonna train you, force your ear to go really fast when it comes to recognizing intervals. Even if you do mistakes, right? It's not about the mistakes, it's about going really fast. The first couple times is going to be all red up there. You can do a lot of mistakes, and then little by little, as you practice, slowly as well, you're going to start becoming really good at that. Anyways, actually, when you start going fast like that, what takes the longest time is to hit the button, find the button, but you'll get it. All right, so now what can we do to make this exercise even more interesting, and especially what can we do to start using the instrument? Because ultimately that's what you want to do. Okay, you want to be able to hear intervals, but you want to be able to utilize it, okay? So, well, first of all, one exercise I would do is just reproduce the interval. So, I would hear this and find the first note. Okay, so now I found my first note. I know it's an E. And now I would go 2 steps. I would try to hear my interval. So here I heard the major sixth. And now that I know it's a major sixth, I'm going to try to play it, and I'm going to try to get it right the first time, right? Cool. So the more you do that, the more you're going to recognize patterns and the fingerings of each interval. And then it's going to be really easy for you when you hear an interval to actually start playing it when you hear a note, to go to the next note is going to become really, really kind of obvious to you. And the more you do that, the more it's going to be easy for you to pick up melodies. Those guys that, you play something and they hear it once and they immediately pick it up. Well, this exercise is going to help you be as badass as those guys. All right, so wait, let's do another one. That was a major sixth. So then put the answer. Well, that was a unison, so that's not really interesting. All right, now I hear the major third, so I'm gonna play it. Right, harmonic interval, and I hear the fifth, so I'm gonna play the fifth. I hear the perfect fourth. Alright, I hear the minor seventh. Boom, I find it on the fretboard. Perfect fourth. And now feel free to play around, once you start being comfortable with that. Really embrace the sound of that interval and get used to it, get familiar with it. Cool. Sweet. Anyways, so that's one of the many things that you can do with Earmaster. But now, again, this video is not about necessarily only about Earmaster and that software, which I really recommend. It's about ear training in general. And I want you to just realize that what I mean here is that ear training is so important, and Earmaster is the best software out there that you can use to actually practice it on your own without having to rely on anyone else. And so this is really why I recommend it. So we could just go into a couple of other exercises just so you can see. So that's when here I've got chords set on tetrads and all the tetrads, because that's where I'm at. But we could just go, very simple. Here we go. Let's do this one here. Poof. Okay, major minor chord, all right? All right, and then you can do kind of the same thing as what I did with intervals. You can take the guitar, so here I see that it's a B, and then play the triad. Alright, so here I see that it starts with an E flat. So this is gonna really help you when it comes to also, just recognizing the notes on the instrument. What I'm doing here is I'm reading E flat, so I gotta find my E flat, and then I gotta play my minor triad. There's all those things that are going on in your head when you're doing those exercises that are just gonna help you so much with, discovering your instrument, and how it sounds, and how the chords sound, and how they sound on the particular instrument, the different positions that you can play those chords, right? On the guitar, there's different ways I could play this minor triad. All right, so those are just some of the things that you could do, and this software again is really complete. It goes, you can really practice everything. Same thing goes with scales. You could go to scales and hear the scale and then try to play it and reproduce it, all that cool stuff. Well guys, this is the end of this video. Thank you very much. I know it was kind of a long video, but I hope I gave you a bunch of value and new things that you can start to experiment and to do and practice that can help you in your musical journey. If you were brave enough or interested enough to watch this video till now, I would like to give you a special offer. There's going to be a discount code. It's WM, like Will Metz, and it'll be in the description box. So this discount code that you can use in order to get a little, I think it's 15% off the Earmaster software. So anyways, I really hope I managed to show you how important ear training is, how amazing it can be when you actually master all the tools that you're going to use in music to compose and make music. It really starts with intervals, so start small and build little by little. And mostly get the software Earmaster. I mean, again, it feels like I'm really promoting it, and I am, because I really believe in it, and it's allowed me to be the musician I am now. So yeah, if you like the video, you can click like on that button, but most importantly, go to Earmaster, use the discount code if you're interested. Thank you very much for watching the video, and I will actually maybe do another video again and a little bit more advanced to dive even more into how I personally use Earmaster and how you can create cool little exercises around the software to make even more progress. All right, thank you very much for watching.